Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to talk about the upcoming Pauline Road resurfacing and water main replacement project scheduled for 2024 construction. I'm Nicholas Bailey. I'll be the project manager, and Cyrus is the transportation engineer. We're going to be running through the presentation today, and Jasmine is our communication engagement specialist. So today we're going to have a few slides just to kind of briefly introduce the project and the overall concept. So we'll be talking about the overview, where things are for next steps, and how to get a hold of the project team. So first off, why are we doing the project? Why now? And it's because the pavement surface condition has deteriorated. It's run its full service life. Also want to replace the water main through that corridor. In 2018, the prior project went from Stadium up to 7th, and now we're carrying that water main project between 7th up to Main Street. An existing 6-inch water main will replace with a 12-inch water main. We'll also be doing some catch basin replacements and resurfacing the road. And the new surface is going to include the all ages and ability bike route. And we're going to also help manage speeds. Now I'd like to hand over to Cyrus, our project transportation engineer, to give us a little bit more background on the different aspects of the deliverables.
Thanks, Nicholas. This is Cyrus Nahidi speaking, and as Nicholas mentioned, there's a few aspects related to city policy and the transportation plan. Those are the policy basis for many infrastructure changes the city is undertaking. So the term Vision Zero refers to the goal of having no fatal or serious injury crashes on Ann Arbor streets by 2025. Two approaches for accomplishing this are to reduce the speeds of vehicles operating on Ann Arbor streets and to better separate uses of the street, such as pedestrian, bicycle, and transit use, separating those uses from each other. And meanwhile, the carbon neutrality goal is that by 2030, our transportation system contributes zero emission towards climate change. The approaches for accomplishing this include fostering more use of clean transportation modes to result in fewer vehicle trips, and encouraging more use of electrical vehicles for those vehicle trips that still occur. So Nicholas mentioned a bit ago about an all ages and abilities bike route, and it's a term that's probably worth explaining just because it may not be intuitive. That term comes from our transportation plan, and what it really means is that there's an emphasis on protecting the most vulnerable users of the street at all ages in their lifespan. And the goal is making the route safe for all users. So whether you're walking, biking, rolling, taking transit, or driving. And context helps to determine the design of the street. So it depends on how fast vehicle traffic travels, how much traffic travels on the street type and the uses of the street, and as well as community preference and the project budget. So it's worth noting that one of the project goals will be to bring vehicle operating speeds down. Currently, we have a speed limit of 30 miles per hour, and the design speed on a road like that is 35 miles per hour, as sort of traditional traffic engineering would dictate. And our goal would be to bring sort of the typical operating speed down below 30 miles per hour, closer to 25 miles per hour. So as part of that, and per council resolution, R22-330, capital projects such as this shall consider speed management tools as part of the design process. And that includes vertical devices such as raised crosswalks and speed tables. And it also involves reconfigurations to the road, as we'll touch on the next few slides, or in a few slides rather. I'll hand it back to Nicholas to talk a little bit about the project overview and schedule.
Thank you. Yes, so clearly we understand that there is the football program that U of M prepares, so we are keeping that in mind as we prepare our construction timeline. Right now, we're in the public engagement aspect. That'll carry on through spring of 2024, and we'll have our final design in the fall of 2024. And then we're going to kick things off early in March for an early start of construction season. And we're planning on having everything completed by the end of July. First week in August. So that way we're well in advance of the big rush for the football season. Now, what are we doing? So the limits of the project are between 7th and Main. We'll be replacing the water main. That's about 2,500 feet. And we will need to get into the 7th intersection for some temporary closure, but that will be limited to a shorter duration of the overall project. So we'll try to minimize the impact on that intersection. And right now, we don't anticipate any interaction in the Main Street intersection. Now Cyrus is going to start to go into the configuration of our pavement surface.
Thanks, Nicholas. So we wanted to talk a little bit about potential ways to change the layout of the road to make to accomplish the policy goals we just talked about, the transportation plan and the A20 carbon neutrality plan. Specifically, within the transportation plan, and the A20, trying to make this an all ages and abilities route for to make this more comfortable for people biking, and to make it more accessible for pedestrians, as well as still accommodating transit use and making it safer for drivers. So this first configuration that we've shown would involve adding buffered bike lanes on each side of the street and retaining curbside parking on the north side. So this configuration would remove parking on the south side, which is near the park. And that would be for the full length of the project area. So not just in front of the park, but also, the entire length of 7th to Main. And if you one thing you may notice is that this may be familiar for anyone who's been further west on Pauline Boulevard. The project that Nicholas referred to earlier, between 7th and Redeemer, has this configuration where we have parking on the north side of Pauline, and we have buffered bike lanes on each side of the street. A similar configuration would just essentially flip that, where we have curbside parking on the south. So we'll just highlight just to show the difference between these two configurations. Otherwise, this is the same as what we just discussed. It's buffered bike lanes in both directions. In this case, the curbside parking would move to the south curb. So that'd be more accessible to the park. Meanwhile, parking on the north side would be removed for the entire project area between 7th and Main. And this is, again, similar to that project area between 7th and Redeemer. The difference here being that on that project area, parking is allowed on the north curb. Here, in this if we use this configuration, it would be allowed on the south curb. That being said, when the Pauline 7th to Stadium project was completed, since then there's been some evolution in terms of types of design we can consider. So there are a few other designs options that we can consider, and that would provide a higher comfort bike facility for both directions of travel. Because in this case, we have the bicyclists that are biking next to the parked cars a little bit more exposed to traffic in both of these configurations. So the next configuration kind of goes, it's a little bit closer to the first north parking configuration. We still have parking allowed on the north side, as we've seen highlighted here. It's the same uses of the street. We have a buffered bike lane in each direction. We have parking. We have 2 directions of vehicle travel. But in this case, because of changing where the parking and the bike lane are laid out to each other, we are able to better protect both directions of bike travel. This floating parking arrangement, kind of acts as protection for the bike lane along the north curb. So it creates a more protected, really more comprehensive all ages and abilities bike route. It's important to note, though, that coordination with Public Works would be required to ensure that solid waste service for trash, recycling, and compost would continue to service without issues. So there may be, we would have to work with Public Works to determine how to best allow them to do that curbside service. And then one more configuration here that is similar again to the previous three. In this case, it's a floating parking configuration where the parking is instead of being at the curb along the south curb, it's just floating, several feet off, allowing space for bikes to bike along the curb for a small buffer space with, some protection, including the car, acting as protection for, that direction of travel. So again, just to reiterate, in terms of accomplishing the transportation plan goals, these two floating parking configurations are the design options that align most closely with the goals of the transportation plan and 820, as they both provide an all ages and abilities bike route in both directions of travel. And then one last cross-section configuration to sort of share is regarding at the crosswalks. So the last several slides showed what the cross sections for Pauline Boulevard could look like in those areas where parking exists. But at crosswalks where parking is illegal, the space that would otherwise be used for parking can be redistributed. And those crosswalks can be created with what is known as a pedestrian bump out design. So that design would extend the sidewalk and use what would otherwise be the parking lane. So that improves the ability for drivers to see pedestrians by bringing them past the vehicles that are parked nearby. And then pedestrians are protected for a greater distance through that extended sidewalk, and they ultimately have a shorter distance of street to cross. And that reduced exposure time within the street provides another safety benefit to pedestrians. So kind of accomplishing a little bit more of our transportation plan goals. You might be familiar with this, again, the project for Pauline that exists west of here, that the redesign that occurred between 7th and Stadium has two crosswalks that are similar to this. One is at Arbordale, Pauline Boulevard at Arbordale, and Pauline at Redeemer. So they both have bumped out crosswalks, and it's important to note that those would be wider. The crosswalks would be wider than the crosswalk that is currently at 5th Street. You'll see in this layout, we have a space for bike travel in both directions and vehicle travel in both directions. Currently at 5th Street, that bump out was made narrow enough to really to allow both directions of vehicle travel, and bikes would have, anyone biking would have to share those vehicle lanes. So our intention would be to redesign that crosswalk and the other existing crosswalks in the area. So at Edgewood, at 5th Street, at Hutchins, to all match this design, so that people biking can bike through the area with a little bit more comfort without sharing that space with vehicles. And it's worth noting that there's the possibility of adding a mid-block crosswalk as well. We can consider adding one on the section of the project between Edgewood Avenue and Main Street. It's over 1,000 feet without a crossing, and especially if there's parking eliminated from one side, it would allow anyone who needs to cross to do so safely to their parking, if they might be parking on the opposite side of the street and might need to cross to get to their destination. And I'll hand it off to Nicholas to wrap up from here.
Thank you, Cyrus. Yes, we were looking forward to receiving your feedback on the project and the concept of these layouts. If you're able to join us for a staff walkthrough starting at 9 o'clock on Saturday, the 11th, May 11th, and Saturday, May 18th, we're going to have a walkthrough. Both Cyrus and I and Jasmine will be there, and we'll be able to explain to you what the different configurations would look like in the field and answer any questions you may have. We'll be taking off from the Almendinger Park shelter, and we look forward to seeing you there. If you're unable to attend either of those walkthroughs, we'd like to hear from you via submission through email, and you contact myself or Cyrus with the email contact at the beginning of the slide package. And we just want to suggest, we want to let you know that this input that we receive is one of the many factors that we used in deciding our final layout of the pavement use. All right, well, we thank you for your time, and we look forward to working with you to help improve the infrastructure and the road network.